So anyway, what we've been doing is my company, Core Resonance, is about our connection with the cosmos. In other words, our nervous system is like a living antenna system. Our nervous system is our center. It's one of the main components of what my work's all about. And as we come to discover that we are actually receivers, in other words, I'll give you an example. Like I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today. I think about it a few days ahead of time, just kind of fleetingly. And what happens is, believe it or not, when you think about something, stuff comes to you. People think that when they think, they just kind of grind stuff out of their head. It doesn't work that way at all. Now, there's can be, certain patterns and habits and certain things and you can recall certain things. But if you're actually in a creative mode and doing something that's original, you have thoughts and it comes to you. Like, now there's an expression here, or the thing I wrote about the presentation today. I wonder where it is. So I wrote this just on the fly, just before we started, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes before we started. Because we seem to be a resistance and reactionary-based species, similar to continuously looking down at our feet, there is so very much we miss. Resistance and reactionary-based means we have not embraced the sky nor looked up to the heavens for answers and insights, and of all things, adventure. Mostly we respond to what life gives us, and mostly we do what everybody else does, because if nothing else, it's easier that way. We repeat, repeat, repeat. As we learn how to open up, as we learn how to consciously partner with innate intelligence and raise up our gaze, we discover that most of life has yet to be experienced. There's a massive amount of life that humans have yet to discover, and in partnership with innate intelligence, we discover endless new horizons of adventure, excitement, and new learning. I wrote that on the fly, just a matter of 10 or 15 minutes ago. And it started out with an idea, so many things that humans have not yet done. So while we wait on Kita, I wonder where she is. Let me look at my email, make sure I'm not missing anything. So she should be along in a second. The point is, humans, we have a very sophisticated nervous system. And the problem with a very sophisticated nervous system is it's easy for it to get on overload. And our nervous systems are on overload. Between the news, between our jobs, there was a time, a long time ago, when the husbands worked or the men worked and the women stayed at home. Now, this is not a, what would you call it, a gender type remark. I'm saying that we used to live in a simpler world where women stayed home and they raised families. Men were the breadwinners, so to speak. Life was simpler, and now it takes both to even make ends meet. Now, I'm all for women working, of course. I want to see a woman president one day. Not Hillary, not in my opinion, but I'd love to see a woman with women's values contributing to making the world a better place from that kind of a position. In fact, as I get off track here a little further, the Dalai Lama said the Western woman is going to save the world. They have that insight and they have access to all the power of America and what the West has to offer, and they have the freedom to express themselves. So I'm going to drop Kita a note. See if I can find out where she is. The point is that humans, we're all on overload, And we basically don't take on too much new stuff. That's what the bottom line is. The idea of adventure and excitement beyond what we normally do is pretty limited because we don't have the processing power to take it on. Let me drop this note real quick. And it stunts us. It stunts our growth. It stunts our adventuring. It stunts our ability to be activists. It stunts our ability to make change and to take on new things. I was in a conversation earlier today with a client, and she was talking about a friend who has an electric company. He sets up it's the first grid system or the first highway system for electric cars to be able to travel across country and have recharging stations along the freeway system so they can actually travel across the highway. And what he was talking about was he traveled the country wanting to know if people wanted green or not. And the conversation was kind of about how Marin County is supposedly very advanced and how middle America is a little bit quieter. And what he was surprised to discover was that middle America wants to be off the grid. Middle America wants energy independence. Middle America wants to be to have all the bells and whistles, and but they're not doing anything. Now, I say that kind of not facetiously, but the point is, everybody seems, we have so much horsepower, it doesn't seem like we're doing much with it. Now, it's true, we have a big country, but there's a lot of people, 325 million, I don't know what the number is. And they're kind of, you might say, slow to boil, slow to create consensus. And the reason this is because we're all kind of stalled out. And what that's all about is we're all on overload. Let me explain my idea of what overload is. My belief is, and what I've come to see and what my work's about, is everything in nature is plugged into a single governance, a single order. All of nature. Nature's big. Nature goes out into space. Nature is at the bottom of the oceans. It's actually inside the tiniest atoms. Nature and this order that everything abides by is everywhere, and we see it in the forests. We see it in the oceans. We see it in the mountaintops. We see it in the trenches in the oceans. There's a commonality that everything shares. And because of that, everything expresses, yes, things come and go, but this overall order continues to exude, continues to express. The humans are out of sync with that. The humans are really a dysfunctional species. I mean, America spends like 56% of its budget on war. I mean, what kind of sense does that make? And the point is that when humans are out of sync with their natural state of connection, we're on our own. We're not plugged into this overall order. We're not plugged into this overall governance that all of nature, all of the plant, animal, mineral kingdoms abide by. And so we're dysfunctional as hell as a species. Now, my work says that we are like living antenna systems. We are like receivers. And as we learn how to quiet down and become less reactionary and less, all the trouble being reactionary creates. As we quiet down, our subtle connection with Source becomes evident, and we can build on that. And as we do, we have access to guidance. We have access to insight. We have access to our inner dialogue. We have access to creativity. I sit down and wrote this, I don't know, it looks like about 100 words. Sometimes when I was reading, I was wondering, oh, hell, I hope I edited this thing, but it came out almost, and it came to me. That's the point. Now, most of us live our lives, like I say, there she is.
Hey.
Is that you?
Yeah, it's me. Sorry, I had a media call.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
No volume.
Let me look. I've
Let's
got
see
volume.
here.
Let's take a look. Shall I go backwards?
I don't hear you.
Okay, let me...
Oh, I bet I do now.
What happened?
I had my mute button on because my emails were coming in and they have tones. I didn't want to close my email because in case I had an email coming from you. So you are found? You were lost?
I have a media client, or a client who needs me as media. We're doing media. Her media launched today, so she at 7 and I had to take care of it. So
All right.
she's fine. She's good. All is well. So we're ready to go.
All
Isn't
right.
synchronicity amazing?
All right. So what I was talking about, and okay, I want to do something now that I've got this set up here. What I want to do is, as the cameraman, I want to close off. How do I do this? Cameraman. There it is. As guests join, hide their audio and video from my broadcast. Yes, because we're going to open it up at 45 minutes after. New guest. Okay, so I think that's the way that stays. So so what I was talking about, and then we're going to go on to the synchronicity. What I was talking about is humans being out of sync with our natural state of connection or on overload. And in overload, we're kind of less than at our optimum. And what I was suggesting, like this thing that I wrote, I think it's about 100 words. I kind of read it. It's because we seem to be in resistance or reactionary-based species, similar to continuous looking down at our feet. There's so very much we miss. And I was suggesting the idea that as we quiet down and become more subtle in our nature, that synchronicity, harmony, and order opens up. That evidence of creativity, that where this actually started is that we don't actually think as much as we think. We have thoughts, but mostly things come to us. Like I've been thinking a little bit about this week, what we were going to talk about, and I don't grind it out of my head like I think people think it happens. It comes to me. And if I'm quiet internally, I can put out a thought and I can get insight back, which I turn into words or turn into ideas. And the point being that when we're resistance and reactionary based, we've got all this noise going on inside of our system, and we miss the subtleties. Now, speaking of subtleties, I wrote this little thing because we seem to be in resistance as a resistance and reactionary based species, which is part of the video. It should be underneath it. And I sent it on to Kita to suggest, hey, why don't we talk about this? And 2 minutes later, she sends me back a video, or pardon me, a joke that had just showed up in her mail. I'm going to show you how fancy I am, see if I can do this. Showcase. Disabled. Screen share. That's right here. And so here I am. I create an idea. The title is "So Many Things That Humans Have Not Yet Done," and that's because we're reactionary based, and we're not looking up at the sky. We're looking at our feet. We're missing most of what's going on. I send this on to Kita, and she sends this back. So I put it on my website. Shows a buzzard. I guess let's see. I wonder if I can make it bigger. Can you read that, Kita?
I can't read it. Let me just see if I get my. I can look on my own email. Or just a minute. Yeah, I can read it. Got my glasses on. Yep.
So If you put a buzzard in a pen that is 6 by 8 and entirely open at the top, the bird, in spite of its ability to fly, will be an absolute prisoner. The reason is that a buzzard always begins a flight from the ground with a run of 10 to 12 feet without space to run. As is its habit, it will not even attempt to fly, but will remain a prisoner for life in a small jail with no lid on it. The ordinary bat that flies around at night, a remarkable nimble creature in the air, cannot take off from a level place. If it is placed on the floor or flat ground, all it can do is shuffle around helplessly and no doubt painfully till it reaches some slight elevation from which it can throw itself into the air. Then at once it takes off like a flash. So how do I move this down? A bumblebee, if dropped into an open tumbler like a glass, will be there until it dies unless it is taken out. It never sees the means of escape at the top, but persists in trying to find some way out through the sides near the bottom. It will seek a way where none exists until it completely destroys itself. In many ways, humans, we are like the buzzard, the bat, and the bumblebee. We struggle about with all of our problems and frustrations, never realizing that all we have to do is look up. That's the answer. The escape route and the solution to any problem, just look up. Sorrow looks back, worry looks around, but faith looks up. And I assume that was set so everybody could see that. So now I want to turn it off. And so this is what Keita and I marvel at, is we have ideas, and then she gets this email. This came in today as a joke, or came in as an email today?
That's right. Yeah.
And that's that. Now there's an example of what magic is like. That's what the high road is about. When you get out of resistance and reactionary posturing, you get out of that rote life. And it's not a negative remark. All I'm saying is that as we become more conscious, we become more allowing. As we become more allowing, more synchronicity, harmony, and order shows up. As we become more allowing, we are less resistant, less reactionary based. And then things get interesting.
They sure do. Yeah. Well, when you send me your paragraph describing the whole idea of not being resistant and allowing, etc., and I immediately thought of a cartoon. I said, my gosh, I can't believe it. You are using theory, and I'm simply using silly pictures with a bit of a description, which is true, because these creatures are locked in their own limitation based on habits, based on behaviors that are learned. They're not inspirational habits or behaviors, they're simply learned. And maybe that might be something we could think about during this session, is the act of learning in and of itself is meant to be freeing. It's meant to give you information or knowledge that allows you to be as best as you can be. I think what's happened is in our learning, whether it's learning by rote or learning by an imposed authority or learning because this is the way it's been done, all these things tend to, instead of free us, limit us. So our learning, as a result, if you're still following me, as the process goes along for us to allow, we literally have to unlearn what we may have been learning all our lives in order to free up, in order to look at, and in order to truly understand what this universe is all about.
I just came out of a conversation with a client only an hour and a half ago, and the conversation was about the idea that she was afraid that she wouldn't have the information and the insight. In other words, she's gotten in over her head in a project, and she was afraid that she wouldn't have the insight, and she's trying to study. And I'm suggesting that the answers don't come in this linear fashion of learning, The answers come as the answers come if you will let them. In other words, we receive the answers. We don't grind through. In other words, learning in school is memorization, and we assume that that's what learning is. But what learning really is learning to trust that you'll have what you need when you need it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
It
that's what
takes, sorry, go ahead.
I said. I think that's what you were saying.
Yes. Well, it takes courage because it takes the idea of leaving that box you're in, leaving the security, the stability, all the things that people are saying that you supposedly need and can't do without. And it's only when you go out on a limb and actually fly off, you realize, hey, I actually can fly. Everybody's telling me that I'm going to fall to the ground, but I can actually fly. Obviously, that's a rather silly analogy, but one doesn't know, and there will be mind over matter to such an extent that we actually will be able to fly because we will it, we intend it.
I've seen a signature line on an email, and it's something about leaping and then building your wings on the way down. So, so there's so much to, I like this idea. What we want to do is we want to get to what our kind of theme was, which is so many things that humans have not yet done. And that's because we're mostly resistance and reactionary based. We take our hints from our surroundings instead of, really breaking away. But there's a world that we can learn how to access. Courage is a big component of that. Trust is a big component of that. And as I was speaking about earlier before you showed up, because we're all on overload, we're all processed out, we've all got too much going on, that willingness to, I don't want to say take a chance, because I assure you we all take chances all the time. But there's a measured learning how, if we can show up in present time, like when you get up and do presentations, even if it's just a minute, a lot of people are kind of intimidated by that. And the game is actually how to just stay in your body when you're up in front of people. Not so much that you've measured and you've studied and you've got your presentation and it's perfect and you've memorized it or whatever, but that you can actually be authentic in front of people, that you can actually be true, that you can actually look around and see what's going on, and at the same time receive insight as you go along. And that's what that trust, I think that's actually what learning is all about, is how to be present, how to be in present time, how to have access to insight. Because again, it's not about grinding it out of our learned. Hell, sometimes in the alphabet, I don't even know if L is in front of T or T's, that it irritates me when sometimes I have to run through the alphabet to find out where M is in relationship to S. That's the failure of education. That's the failure of traditional education.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know how many people. Now, I know where a 9 is in relationship to a 5 pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But this rote learning hasn't served us. And I think learning is when you break away from that kind of learning and start discovering what's true for you, and of course expressing yourself. And as you become true, then the world opens up.
Yeah. And the thing is, I would say here that the world opens to us in a different way. We're all different in how we perhaps perceive and even take in what the world is showing us. For instance, some people, as I've been told and read about, perceive numbers as colors, so that they look at a 6 and they see the color blue, or they look at a 3 and they see the color yellow, etc. Other people may take in the alphabet, as you've been saying, Jim, not so much that you have to repeat it, but they can visualize the letters, let's say on a windowsill, and they can literally encapsulate the 26 letters as they look at them in image form in their mind's eye. And I think in terms of this allowing that we're all about, this idea that there's so much more that we have to find out, I think what is really interesting and quite an adventure for each of us is the fact that our uniqueness defines the way we are going to allow.
Say that one more time. You're breaking up just a tiny bit. Say that statement again.
Our uniqueness, the fact that we are each unique unto ourselves, our uniqueness defines our allowing by virtue of the fact that the perceptions we receive and emit, whether it's talking, running, any other physical way, these are all exclusive to us as unique human beings. So your way of allowing, which is non-resistant, in some case, in some way or shape or form, will be different from the way I allow. And this again is simply opens up the vista of not resisting all the more. It's just so expansive that everyone's idea and ways and means of allowing will undoubtedly vary. And that again is the mystery and magic of moving through this process.
I think that's a really interesting remark. I like that a lot. Another aspect of the dimension of allowing, yeah, because each we have our own, that sounded like Yoda there. Each we have our own perspectives, and while some people see colors or numbers as colors, and some people can't tell you if an F, not an F or a G, but an F or a K. Well, anyway, we have different perceptions, and actually we live in different worlds, and therefore our allowing and our encompassing our world and how the mechanics of that unfolds is all going to be comparing notes. It's not all going to be identical, is it?
No, but what again? If you take this a step further, you've got all these, if you want to call them unique worlds or universes unto each other, unto ourselves. And yet there is this amazing, all-encompassing truth that brings us together, that connects us. Case in point, you had a descriptive form of information. I had a cartoon or an image-like form of information that in reality described the same thing. So we've received in a different manner, and it takes the whole, which is what we're part of, to literally bring us together, and we realize we're not separate at all. We are totally joined.
That's good. I like that.
Totally joined. And this example tonight is I think one of the first very, very clear examples of that we can tell everybody that has literally just happened today.
Yeah, and I can recollect, first off, thinking about what we wanted to talk about this week, because we don't have quite an order, even though we're using the term, whatever it is we're using, dimensioned as part of our core. But I can think of the several times during the week that it occurred to me, what is our talk going to be about on Tuesday? And as Tuesday rolled up, I didn't really have anything, and I had a client for an hour and a half. I think that was finished an hour and a half before this talk started. And so I finally sat down and I just wrote it out. It came out in one shot, kind of by itself. I did edit it a tiny bit. And so there came a point where I had an impetus about what I wanted to do. It came out. I touch base with you. You bounce back with a totally different, not interpretation, but different venue of, in other words, yours was graphic where mine was words, but they were a match. And I think it's a great example of wholeness. I talk at Visionaries Thrive in All Times about how the universe unfolds and how we become the mechanism in other people's unfoldings. In other words, people think they have a direct relationship with the cosmos, which they do, and they interface with the cosmos direct, which they do, but the cosmos often interfaces with them through a third party. When we discover ourselves as being a third party interacting on behalf of this other person, the cosmos flowing through us, for which we become a cog in their reality we're creating. It's another example of how we're all connected, how all this thing is driven, and actually the scale of the beauty and order of all of it.
Yeah, it's I'm immediately seeing sort of a hexagon. You know what, the way a beehive is built with
Yeah.
the little. I mean, that's an image that I'm literally just popping into my head. It's probably even more sophisticated and even more elegant, but that in itself is elegant in the fact that everything fits. Even though everything has its own space, its own moment, it all fits. And I think if we took any living creature and we were going to break down its living space, whether you're talking about a snowflake or you're talking about a molecule of water, or you're talking about a grain of sand, if you look at any of these themes, the symmetry and the majesty and the interconnectedness of what you are seeing is so beautiful and so complex and so simple all at the same time that really only an intelligence, a divinity could put it all together.
You're familiar with sacred geometry, I'm sure, and sacred geometry is that not ability to measure it, but kind of replicate it from the human mind. Yeah, there's a scale of order that is huge, and frankly, it's everywhere. And if we weren't so busy looking down at our feet, shuffling around, and caught up in the news, and caught up in what so and so said, and caught up in what so and so said back to so and actually kind of even sucking energy out of some of this other things that are going on, instead of having this plugged inness that's available to us and living at a much higher. The humans are out of sync with our natural state, and we pay the price, and there's evidence all around us for the scale of order. And I will say that increasingly more and more people are waking up. They're looking at their shoes less and looking at the sky and the stars more. And as they do, it's intriguing, and it's inviting, and it's comforting, and it's safe, and it's magical, and it brings dimension to our unfoldings, for which a big silly grin on your face becomes the biggest expression. Is there comes a point where you can't even express it, you can't even talk about it anymore. It's just magic, it's life, it's what the tulips already know about.
True. I always find it, especially now where you're talking about people being distracted, it is, to me, it's sad. You can be walking down the street, you'll see a beautiful blue sky, the clouds, birds in the trees, whatever. And somebody in front of you, they're walking past you, and their total face, their total focus is on their phone. And in that moments that pass, I feel for them, because they're missing They're missing the moment of that sound of the bird, or what is the beauty in that moment. And it'll never come back. It'll never happen again. If somebody said to you, you are never going to see this again, ever, 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 ever again. That is amazingly profound. And yet people are going about their business. They're not seeing. They're not seeing. And maybe this discussion we're having over the weeks we are, Jim, about not showing resistance, allowing and all, will simply give some people the inclination, even the permission to see. Just let them see.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. And one, I puzzle a great deal about the part that smartphones and all the electronics that we use. And my belief is that it's part of our unfolding as a species. And while it's really a young tool, there's a lot of amazement by it, and people get dissuaded from the bigger scale. Of course, probably what you're talking about, somebody saw something very magical on Facebook that was better than bird singing, but
and that's all right. That's all right. I mean, we all have choices. We all have incredible power to make choices.
But the other point is that, and this is not a negative remark. I think this is actually true, and America was one of the first countries where it became expressed as so. Is that humans? There's actually not that many humans that are truly leaders. Now, people lead inside of their families, I assume. I'm sure there's a lot of love found in families, and there's different kinds of leadership found in families, and there's different kinds of leadership found in all kinds of different things. But my point is, I believe that humanity lives on the coattails of a few. And I think the coattails of a few, I think of Bill Gates. I think about Michael Dell, who at one point, I think was the biggest computer builder on the planet, I think. Steve Jobs, and some of these other characters, and of course we can go into history, where most of us live on the coattails of their access to the cosmos and their ability to ground inventions and ideas and discoveries. And I think it's probably going to always be like that, where a lot of people, I don't mean people are followers, and that doesn't mean people are dumb, but some people are simply wired to express in these manners for which the rest of humanity kind of gets to take kind of the easy road. Now, one of the other things that's going on is I think more than ever, more people are waking up to their possibility, but it's kind of like you have a pond and you've got a lot of tadpoles in it, and some of those tadpoles become frogs, and the frogs go on, and in the meantime, there's a lot of humanity that kind of stirs around and learns its lessons at its rate and speed, and there's other parts of humanity that's really steaming along. That tends to be your leaders. I like to say a leader is not necessarily somebody that's political or somebody that owns a big corporation. I would think that Yeshua, Jesus, was a leader. They're still talking about him 2,000 years later. And of course, real leadership, I would suggest, probably is more about love. And what is love? Non-resistance, allowing, keeping your attention on what's true. And I think we're learning that at the rate and speed that we're learning it, and that is the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, my volume seems to be. Anyway, if we go back to the whole idea of self-expression and how we are all unique, I don't think it's an accident that some of us are who we are. We're identified as a leader or a follower. But I think within the context of who we are in this world, we all of us, whether we're a leader or not, have the power, have the absolute authority to live a good life and to see life as a wonderful process by virtue of allowing. You don't have to be anything to allow. You don't have to be a leader to allow. You don't have to have lots of money to allow. You simply, in one way, have to be yourself to allow. Give yourself permission to be yourself. And when that happens, you'll automatically disengage from what so-and-so thinks is the truth or what so-and-so thinks you should be doing. Because the act of becoming oneself is an authentic declaration. And authenticity, as we know, Jim, is part of non-resistance. It is part of allowing. So if one is coming, then the other, I think, can follow, or at least can follow more easily.
Well, I agree with that, and I would suggest that, frankly, anybody, first off, everybody is a leader. People don't necessarily lead well, but everybody influences others, so everybody's a leader as it regards others. And I think the quality of leadership is more about authenticity, allowing. See, it's not about non-resistance. It's not about, well, I'm not going to fight with so-and-so. It's that resistance makes our brain and our nervous system so on overload that we don't have access to that subtle connection that is our very nature. And so it's not so much about non-resistance as it is quieting the nervous system so that subtle component of our nature becomes available, for which we have insights, and it's in those insights plugged into the cosmos that we become the truest leader. And again, it doesn't have to be somebody that influences hundreds and thousands of people and millions of people. A leader can be somebody that simply lives their life in grace and in truth and in us. In other words, they live their life their way. I guess on one hand, everybody does that anyway. Not everybody does a lot with it, though.
Mm-hmm. Now, you make a good point about the fact that everyone is a leader. It's a question of whether one uses a literal definition or not. But the fact that we're all here as human beings, already presupposes our importance, our importance as an individual. If one thinks about the fact that you have the gift to be here in life, then it behooves each one of the individuals to take care of that life, to realize that it's a gift, and see what we can do with it, see what we can do with ourselves as the human beings we are.
So what we can do with the gift is, let's go back to the original remark. I just covered it up. Let's see. So many things the humans have not yet done. I actually remember waking up one morning. It was about 2.5 weeks ago, and I put it in my cell phone. I touched on it 2 weeks ago when we were talking. But leadership is where our lives start to open up. A leader means we become responsible for ourselves. We become responsible for our actions. We come to discover that cause and effect is alive and well. And if we do this or we do that, we're going to get that kind of a reaction, or we're going to get that kind of a response. And if we do this and we do this, we're going to get a different kind of response or feedback. And I think that leadership in part comes from, it's kind of how we work our way up into becoming conscious. And as we become more conscious, what's interesting is that most of humanity, broadly speaking, and I use the term broadly speaking, is resistance and reactionary based, or we take our hints off our surroundings. And so we don't really lift our eyes up, and we don't really yet know how to embrace our possibilities. And as we come to learn how to embrace our possibilities, which to my way of thinking means partnering with something bigger than ourselves, I call it innate intelligence. But as we learn how to partner with something bigger than ourselves, escape our momentum as it already exists, and go bigger, I think the amount of exploration that the humans can do is beyond. I'll bet you in our negativity and our resistance and reactionary based leadership role and models and going forward, I bet you we're not exploring 5% of the possibilities. And I think that if we were to move into this bigger scale, that the amount of inventions and insights and creativity, I think it would just lead to so much more, and it would be such a much more colorful world than the world that is wrought by resistance and reactionary processing. Or, yeah, resistance and reactionary processing of the world. I don't think it opens up until we learn how to let go. And then I think the sky is much bigger than the ground, much bigger than the ground.
Yeah, the sky's the limit, they say. The
Yeah.
other aspect to it is as you allow, I think there naturally comes in a sense of wonder and curiosity. I mean, if we literally look up in the sky, as you've said, Jim, there's far more to see. There's far more to imagine. There's far more even to create and looking at the sky than perhaps there is in looking at your feet at the ground. And yeah, I think that's a very, I mean, biblically speaking, spiritually speaking, it's always been said, look up, don't look down. Look upon the eyes of heaven rather than the eyes of the ground. I mean, these are certainly, they posit religious connotations, but within religion itself, as we all know, there is and are kernels of truth. And I do feel that's a very powerful, powerful statement that sometimes has been underestimated.
Well, and you know what's beyond the sky, of course, is the stars. And so it gets even bigger and bigger as we look up and learn how to express in partnership with this scale of order. For example, my personal opinion is the Earth as we know it as a planet is a planet of duality. Positive, negative, fast, slow, high, low, right, wrong, left. I don't know how I did that. Left and right and fast and slow. And it's really, and we kind of use that polarity like climbing a ladder to climb up. And we use contrast to come to know the difference. And my belief is that this planet, kind of like a pond with pollywogs, and that, well, see, I'm a believer in ascension. And what I believe is that humans have that potential in this expression on this planet, in this life, to overcome the duality and to go beyond that. In other words, good, okay, you got good, but the opposite of that is evil. And I believe there's more. I think there's being, I think there is isness, I think there is presence, which is neither good nor evil. And I think we need to learn how to move to that neutrality. And you see, it's becoming a leader individually and discovering our inner nature, where we start to move past the polarities. And as we do, I think we birth something else. In other words, I believe ascension is real, and I believe that this planet is a duality of polarity. And as we learn how to escape polarity, we kind of launch to a whole nother level of existence. And you see, you're not going to get there by resistance. You get there by not even saying, oh, I'm going to stay on the good side of the fence. I'm just going to do the right stuff. I'm just going to do the high stuff. I'm not going to do any of the low stuff. And all of that polarity has limitations in it. And I think we need to learn how to go to not neutrality, but presence. And in presence, guidance is found, and guidance delivers us to order. And I believe that there's that capacity to escape the incubation, the embryonic stage of humanity, because I think there is so much more. And I think it just begs the remark that there are so many things that humans have not yet done.
No, well, I agree in the sense that if you escape willfully the constraints of either belief system or platitudes, all that is given to you, and we can go back to that word learning, and you realize that there's something much bigger and broader, then out of that, there will be newness. There will be curiosity to discover and to find new things, different things. And I agree totally that our exploration is finite, just as scientists, physicists have pointed out that what we know in terms of the universe is so infinitesimally small. But can you imagine that if you even have a glimpse of what else there is, we'll make up some pretty good ground, I think.
Well, the idea of the Hubble telescope, for example, is the Hubble telescope is created by the mind of man. And the mind of man has limited perspective. Therefore, when it builds tools, it looks out into the universe in a certain manner. And so it only measures what the mind of man can imagine to measure. And I think we're talking about 1/3 of 1% or 1/80 millionth of 1%, because mind of man has a huge limitation. And again, I like to throw out the analogy that partnering with something bigger than ourselves, I call it innate intelligence, is how we escape the limitations of being born, I don't want to say into this dimension, but we're surrounded with high, low, fast, slow, good, bad, up, down. And I think that actually the world is much bigger. Nature is not limited to high and low, fast and slow. Man measures things by that, but it doesn't mean, it's like humans can't hear what dogs can hear. That doesn't mean that what dogs hear isn't real. And the traditional education says, well, this is that and that's that, and most of us go forward that way. And breaking free is how we discover that the world is a bigger place and the possibilities are bigger. For a silly example, I think the amount of pollution every time a rocket goes off is unbelievable. And you give it a few more years and rockets going into space, I mean, they don't have any pollution control on those things right now. We got them on the cars, but the rockets, they leave an incredible amount of debris and trash in the air. And all I'm saying is that we're in our infancy as a species. We only are playing with little wooden blocks. We haven't got to Tinker Toys yet, much less Tinker Toys, holy smokes. We haven't got to Legos yet. We haven't got to fancier tools and fancier toys. And I think we're going to discover, when I say it's a mind game, that there's a state and a mindset that we have to learn how to grow. We need to learn how to go past the black and white world that we live in and move into Technicolor. And I think as we do, we'll find that there is so much yet to explore. And I think it starts with the mind and, frankly, letting go.
Yeah. You have to use your mind in order to then literally let it go. Use your mind in order to lose it.
funny because that's so, for myself. So when I was really young, I was really big on harnessing the mind and goal setting and harnessing the subconscious mind and all that. I retired by the time I was 30. Then I looked around and I go, well, what's next? And this traditional version of stuff hasn't been that interesting. So I find myself in advanced consciousness work. And that is where all the interest is. That's where all the excitement is. That's where all the true adventuring is. And I will say it takes courage. It takes a few things. But the funny part is, as we do it, we just start to discover that there's breadcrumbs, that there's synchronicity, harmony, and order that lights our way. And just like the way this talk started, I came up with an idea. You got an email that was a joke or whatever this analogy that was an exact match. And here we are talking about something, and you can't sit there and take a chalkboard and draw out a bunch of circles and arrows and diagrams that's how this happened. It's on a bigger scale. And as we learn how to plug into that, it becomes a very rewarding way to go. And then turns out it's exponentially contributive. But I think we're running out of time. So exponentially contributive, one of my favorite expressions.
It's been a good discussion. Good discussion. So let's see what happens next week in terms of the universe reaching out, and you never know.
Well, what's funny? It's kind of like last night I was at a meeting last night. I met some really interesting people, and I was recounting that meeting today. And I thought it was like 4 or 5 days ago. I thought that the people that I met last night and talked with out in the dark under the, after they'd closed the building and we talked, I would have said that was 4 or 5 days ago. It turned out it was last night. This morning is only shortly later, but it seemed like a week. But the point is, this exponential possibilities. It would be interesting to see where we are a week from now in what we attempt to express and unfold the possibilities in conversation with the magic.
With magic. Always with magic. I'll have my wand.
There we go. There we go.
I'll have my wand. Anyway, thanks so much, Jim.
Keita, very nice to spend some time, and we'll have this thing up. People can make comments, and we'll go from there.
We'll go from there. All right. Have a good night.
Big hug. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.